So it's October 20th. We're getting to the end of the October lull phase, which is where we haven't been seeing very much daylight movement from big bucks, at least not very far from their bedding area. So not been a lot of daylight feeding going on. We did have those couple cold fronts that got them up on their feet a little bit, but haven't been moving as much as we're about to see them in the pre-rut that's coming up. It's going to be next week, or that week of Halloween that we always talk about, that I've talked about on these videos and we've hit on in the podcast. So with that, I wanted to go over some pre-rut hunting tips. And the first one is start keying in on mornings. So we talked about it a little bit before. The early season isn't always the best for mornings unless you can get a cold front coming in or you catch the right one. But now, with the pre-rut coming through, you're really going to want to start looking at those morning hunts. If you've got the right wind and the right stand, it can be really good this time of year because those bucks are moving more in the daylight in the early hours of the day rather than just in the evenings. There's cool parts of the days in the morning before it gets warm, or when those cold fronts are coming through. Those are still important as well, but you really start hitting those morning hunts. The bucks are going to be moving through those travel corridors and hitting their scrape lines, which takes me into the second one, hunting those scrape lines. So this time of year is when they're going to use those scrape lines and rub lines more than any other. The bucks are trying to maintain their dominance, so they're going to come in and check what other bucks are in the area. Some people say they'll check the scrapes to see if there's any does that are coming to estrus that have been on them. Some people say that's not true. Either way, they still seem to hit those scrapes a lot in the daylight this time of year. The rub lines are mostly going to be at night, so you may not want to sit on one of those necessarily, but if you can find a good scrape line or a good community scrape, that's going to be a good spot to hit, especially if it's on a travel corridor between that bedding and food. The third one I wanted to hit on is to start using calls. So the buck's testosterone is really high this time of year. It's rising as the rut's getting closer and closer. We're really only one phase away from the rut now, so they're getting less and less likely to deal with other bucks in the area. So they're looking to run off competition by fighting. So you can get those bucks to come in depending on the deer. Now there's some deer that are going to be less likely to respond to calls and some deer that are going to be more likely. You may hit a grunt tube once and he comes from 200 yards away. Another one may be 50 yards away, hit the grunt tube at the rattle horns, you can't get him to turn or do anything. So, but this is a good time of year to start using those calls, whether it be rattling or grunt tube. Try some blind calling if you're in the right spot. I don't do a lot of it myself, but it can be effective. Especially the rattling antlers. So if it gets to that right time of day and you haven't seen anything but you think there should be something in the area, maybe that's the time you try to do some rattling, see what may come into it. The bucks are really going to be responsive. Most of them are going to be responsive to that calling this time of year. So the next one I wanted to hit on is hunt the does. If you've got a lot of does on your property or wherever you're hunting, it's going to be a good time to find where they're hanging out and then hunt around that. Obviously that's more eyes on you, so you got to be a little more careful, but if you can find where they're going, this time of year the bucks shouldn't be very far behind. They're going to be constantly checking those does and cutting those doe trails, coming in on food plots downwind behind does to see if there's any coming into estrus, because they're going to want to be the first buck to get in on that first doe. So hunt the does, that's a good strategy this time of year as well. And then another one is you'll have different stands for the mornings and the evenings. So I said kind of a little bit that you want to hunt those scrape lines in the mornings and the travel corridors. That's a really good strategy for the morning, but not necessarily the evening, because we're not into the full rut yet where they're going to be moving that same way all day long. So in the evenings, you're still going to want to sit on those food sources because the does haven't necessarily came in yet, so they're still on their feeding pattern. You want to hit those green food sources where they're going to be, because the beans are turning, or they already have turned, or even a lot of them are out now this time of year, and especially by next week. And the corn's out, the farmers are getting that out. So if you got a good green food plot, that's a really good place to be. The does are going to start filtering out into that earlier and earlier, which is going to bring the bucks out during this pre-rut phase. So the last thing I wanted to hit on is you're still going to be wanting to hunt the weather. If we get a good cold front coming through, like we've got coming through tomorrow and in this weekend, that's going to be really important as well. So you never want to ignore that until we get into the big part of the rut where they're running all day long, pretty much no matter what. If you get hot weather, then it'll definitely slow them down, but they'll still be moving. This time of year, if you can get a good cold front coming through, get a good temperature throughout the day, you can see a lot of daytime movement from a lot of big mature bucks. It's a really good time to be in the woods, on a food plot in the evenings. Wherever you got your stand set up for the right winds, that's going to be a good place to be when a cold front comes through. It's just going to be even better now because we're in this pre-rut phase than it would have been earlier in the year. So definitely still hunt the weather. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to hit on. So hopefully this will help you guys have some success. This is, like I said, like we've said a ton of times here at Ridge Hunter, this week of October is one of the best weeks to hunt all year. Everybody goes crazy about the rut, and we understand that because obviously deer are moving all times of day, but it can be kind of random. This time of year, they're still a little bit predictable, but they're also on their feet a lot more during the daylight. So this is a really good time of year to hunt. We're excited to get out there after it. I know you guys are too. So hopefully this is some stuff that you guys can think about, implement, and you'll be successful this next upcoming week and maybe get your target buck on the ground. So thanks for watching, and we'll do another one next week, which will probably be on the rut. So November's coming right up. That's really exciting. So again, thanks guys.